Hello, hello. Welcome back. We are so excited to have you. My name is Danielle Farage. I help to essentially bridge gaps between generations of the workplace, focusing much on the next generation of workers. And I'm so excited to welcome you to this very important conversation on building inclusive workplaces. Now, this is a topic that I feel like hasn't gotten as much airtime as it used to. And I think that this conversation can actually help us inspire and kick off a new kind of era of how we think about inclusion and specifically allyship. So today's panel is all about action, how each of us, no matter our role, our background, what we're going through being mothers or not, can be an active ally and help build a culture where everyone feels seen, heard, and respected. So allyship, just a reminder, it's something that we practice every day. I know I do, through how we listen, how we advocate, and show up for each other. And we have such a fantastic group of panelists here who we will hear from them. They'll share their perspectives, their experiences, their strategies, their personal stories. So let's get into it. I'm going to let everyone introduce themselves really briefly, just like name what you do, and then we will get started on the first question. So let's go to Kim first.
Well, hi, I'm Kim. I'm a project manager at a tech company and I'm a mom. And just for FYI for everybody, both my kids are vomiting. So at any point I might run. So sorry about that now. But Angelique and Reham are like super great. So they'll totally make up for my absence potentially.
Love it. Awesome. Angelique, let's go to you.
Good afternoon. My name is Angelique Hamilton, and I'm the CEO and founder of the HR Chique Group, which is a HR consultancy for the small business and startup.
Love it. Such a cool name. Very chic. And last and finally.
Hi, everyone. My name is Reham Fareed. I'm the Director of Diversity, Inclusion, and Belonging at a big law firm, Blink Rome.
Love it. All right, let's get started with our first question. And also, anyone in the chat, feel free to answer this as well. Honestly, that goes for every question. I want to create as much conversation as possible. Kim, I'm going to start with you. What does allyship mean to you personally? And how have you seen it show up meaningfully or even shift workplace dynamics?
Personally, for me, I think it's really important that it's tangible. Like you need to make a tangible difference in someone else's life or with their experience, right? Like you might not be able to change their entire life, but their experience at work, right? So if you're showing up, I am a 35-year-old white lady, generally well privileged, and been at a company for a long time. And if I can do anything to make it easier for someone else, then that is what allyship means to me, right? Like it's my job as a human to be a human, but then the more I step out to bring other people with me, the better.
Mm-hmm.
Always a little dance move at the end. Sorry.
We can dance on here. And also just like, thank you for showing up and like being a mother and like being so upfront and talking about, the real life, like the BTS, the behind the scenes of like being a mother and like what's going on in your life. So like, great start, honestly.
Honestly, it's shift in the workplace mentality with that too. I posted to my entire team and it's a ton of men. And I was like, everyone's barfing, right? And instead of being like, oh, you're not going to be online or, oh, aren't you? It was a lot of gifts of vomit, right? Like, okay. Like we've made it a much more inclusive way to talk about children, which we need to.
100%.
They exist. They're all over.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's everyone's responsibility, right? It's both parents, or even three, if you have three parents. All right, Angelique, let's go to you. What does allyship mean?
Well, allyship for me, it means to be definitely active. I would agree with Kim in that. For one of the things I always see people say, I'm an ally, like it's a bumper sticker or a name tag that you have on your chest to say, yeah, I'm an ally. Yes, it is a noun, but it's also a verb meaning it's an action. So it's a true partnership, serving as that partner to another person in need or that person that needs support. And what I've seen throughout my career in human resources is serving as an ally for other individuals who are underrepresented or feel like they don't have that person to serve as a voice for them. And I think it's truly so important for us to advocate for others to do that.
Definitely. And lastly, Reham, let's go to you.
Yeah. So one definition of allyship that has always really stuck with me, though I wish I could properly credit it, is allyship is when someone else acknowledges that they see what you see. And that idea is really sticking with
Mm.
me because it gets to the heart of what allyship means to me, which is ultimately sometimes it's just about validation, right? But I've seen it shift workplace dynamics when someone says, "You're not imagining this, I see it too, and I care enough to do something about it," right? So back to that action of it all.
Wow, that hit so deep. Like that was such a deep cut. Thank you so much. And it's so simple too. It's like allyship is just being seen and that feeling that comes with that. Um, we're gonna move on to question number 3, and I see that comment definitely resonated with people in the chat. I love it. Going on to this actionability, right? What is one small everyday action that people can take to create a more inclusive environment, especially if they don't hold formal leadership roles? And I guess, Reham, let's start with you.
Yeah, sure. So I think, mentorship certainly doesn't have to be a long term commitment. And that's something that we all sort of forget sometimes. You don't have to be in a formal leadership role to sponsor or speak to a person's abilities when they aren't in the room that you happen to be in, right? So a single conversation, an introduction, a moment of encouragement, even can really create lasting impact. And I've seen this and I've experienced this myself, right, coming up in my career as well. Oftentimes looking to my left and my right, and us sort of encouraging each other and being there for each other. But I think for me, what matters is the intention behind it, right? Are you helping someone feel seen, more capable, and connected, right, to the organization and the team?
Beautifully said.
Yeah.
And yes, a very poignant point about mentorship. Um, what about you, Kim?
Small everyday action. I
Yeah.
I used to be a leader and I stepped down, and I find it's like super essential for individual contributors to do this kind of stuff because it's almost more impactful. It's less of a
Mhm.
company being like, we should be inclusive, and more like
Yeah.
actually being inclusive. But something I try to do every day is intros, like cold intros. I've been at the company I've been at for a long time, and I know people. And so I'll be like, do you not know this person? I know this person. Join me in a Slack DM. Here's a gift. Or something that is just like, oh, I'm going to introduce you, or showing up even, right? Like if someone's doing an event, show up, right? I have learned how to make delicious dumplings. And it was like 11 p.m. my time, but I showed up, right? We're showing up. And the more we can show up for others, if they're hosting something or need help, or they post a Slack post that needs to get attention, but no one's looking at it, comment on the thread, emoji it up, right? Whatever is getting access for them, right? If
Mhm.
you are just showing up, and it could be as little as I'm literally in this meeting right now, but I just got tagged in something and I was like, plus, plus, because that's all I can do currently at the moment, right? I probably shouldn't have responded to that Slack. But I brought attention to it immediately because I'm
Yeah.
using what I have to bring attention to others. So showing up
Right.
is the too long didn't read response to
And
that.
yeah, and that's the beauty of having a platform too, right? Is like you have this extra tool in your toolbox, in my opinion, where you can show up and you can promote others basically for free, right? You don't want people to unfollow you, I guess, but like the odds are, if you like someone, other people in your network are going to like them too. So I love those posts on LinkedIn that are like, here are people who are creating content that inspire me, or something or other. Future leaders of this industry that people need to pay more attention to. It's not just the Forbes 30 under 30 list that we need to be paying attention to. It's who do you know in your personal network. So I love that, and love is free, support is free. We love that. Angelique, why don't we go to you to bring us home?
Yeah, I think it's all about being the pep squad for the everyday person. And I would agree with my peers. It's advocating and supporting one another. When you don't have that person standing in the gap for you, you're your only voice. So every day matters for everyone when you're at work or you're, out in the office. So the one thing that you can do is again be that voice for that individual who can't do that, whether it's through Slack or whether it's through email or whether it's through a stand-up meeting, speaking up on behalf of that individual so that they can get to shine too and also highlight some of their talents and their contributions to the organization.
Definitely. And I think part of that too is just like getting to know people on a regular basis. I noticed this with my own generation, and I'm sure other people are guilty of it too. Like, you only network when you need a job. And it's so important to continue to build and foster those relationships, like, especially when you don't need a job, because then when you do need a job, you've now delivered so much value and invested so much in getting to know other people that, like, and caring for their causes and helping them be seen, that they then feel the desire and the willingness to help you in return. So I think, like, building those relationships is super important, which I guess brings us to our next question, which is more around like career support and advocacy. More specifically, how can people in positions of influence advocate for equity and promotion and project opportunities as we move more to project-based working, and not just offer mentorship? I guess we'll start with let's start with Kim.
Yes. Sorry, I was listening for screaming in the background while you were saying that. So I'm currently not in a position of influence anymore, right? Like, I'm just an IC and just have like social capital as influence. But where you can show up for others is making a big deal, right? Like, someone does really good at working things, right? And it's just the day-to-day work, but they did great. They get up. Celebrate other people's success. A dev team finally hits the end of the sprint, right? Sprints take time. I don't know how many of you work in tech. Sprints are hard. Sprints can get worse. Tech debt is bad, and tech debt piles up. So we've done something. It may not be a big deal to the rest of the company. It may not be like overarchingly over impactful on the code base, but it did something and it solved a problem. Pick it up, because they probably like huffed away at this work for forever and have hated it and have done it. And now they're just going to dive into like another Jira task and want to keep going, but also feel like all this work I'm doing is nothing. Pick it up. Right. That as someone in not a position of leadership at the point, that's all I can do, is make sure I'm drawing attention for eyes that need to see that work, to make sure that that work is understood and appreciated. Celebrate. Party parrot emoji. I don't know if that's in your guys' Slack instance. And if you use Teams, I'm so sorry. But like, that's the emoji that I would like to use the most in life. If that was on the stage chat right now.
Yeah.
It would be
We used to
whirling.
have our own emojis at the last place I worked. We would like create our custom emojis of like each other's faces and reactions to certain things. I highly recommend it. It's very funny. Yeah, the party parrot honestly doesn't get enough love. But yeah, to your point, like, I think also in that, networking, like, we need to get to know each other so that we can understand what each other's goals are. So that when we're in the room, even if we aren't in positions of power, we can be like, hey, like, this person on this other team said that they wanted to dabble in project, management, and like, let's get them involved in this project. So I'd love to see more of that type of cross-pollination happening. And I think that can happen through like, this sort of, allyship, lens. Like, there's no reason why that can't be like a personal mission for each of us. Angelique, what about you?
Yeah, well, I will tell you that everyone has a power of influence. We all each day have the ability to influence what's happening in the organization. We're all making up the body of an organization and a company. So what you have to say about someone else adds value to their success as well as their achievement. Only look at everyone in your company is just with a title. So the power of influence is how you yield that power of influence to either your manager, the person you work next to in your cube or office, but you have that ability to do that. I'm a big believer in celebrating success and achievements. If you have a project that you've worked on for weeks and no one recognizes it, but I noticed it, I'm going to give you a big up because that's something that you did that no one else noticed. Secondly, I think it's so important that we celebrate anytime there's any milestone within your team or any milestone that you've accomplished, whether it's personal or professional. That's something that should be celebrated. And that's one of the main reasons most people leave their organization, because of lack of recognition. If you're not getting recognized, you're going in every day to a 9 to 5, there's no gumption of what's happening on your side of the world. You feel like you're not, you're not being honored in that role. So the biggest thing that I can share with anyone, you have the power. You have the power to yield, to celebrate your success, share your successes, because if you don't share it about yourself, no one else will do it for you. So you have to be your biggest cheerleader and shout it to the rooftops about what you're doing. If you're the bomb.com, say that you're the bomb.com and let
Hell
everybody
yeah.
know that.
I think you're the bomb.com. I think we all needed that pep talk. I go to these like women's leadership summit things, and they always like start with brags. And I went to one recently that was like it was a mini conference on life hacks. And again, we started with brags. And I think like just we are deprived of celebrating ourselves out of the fear of, being, I don't know what like, why is it actually? I'm actually curious. Like, don't be self-indulgent. Like, what is that?
Yeah, I always say that I think we're so reserved about celebrating successes, like we come across as arrogant or pompous. But no, if no one knows what you're doing, no one knows what you're doing. So it's okay to brag about your accomplishments. You worked hard for it. So doggone, show it, make sure that everybody knows.
Your accomplishments, and I would also say your goals and your aspirations. Like, put it out there in the universe, baby. And Reham, please share with us something that you feel like is an actionable way that people can really advocate for that promotion and project opportunities.
Yeah, I love the direction that the conversation is taking. So I'm super eager to jump in, because I know the original question was about, like leaders, and I want to touch on that as well. But a plug for a book that really helped me is literally called Brag Better. So just putting that out there if anybody wants to look that up and check that out, because it really does walk you through and help you with sort of, some of the blockages that we all have, right? And uncomfortability around that. But at the end of the day, it really tangibly shows you, right, like how important it is, but more importantly, like how to do that based on what your personal block might be around it. And I think it's something that I'm constantly still working on. So it's something that all of us, I think, experience at one point or the other, but incredibly important. And I love sort of the two-sidedness of this conversation is, again, right, kind of what we were talking about earlier, where it's everyone's job. Like everybody has a role to play in making these outcomes better for everyone. And that includes starting with yourself, right? And yes, you do have to put yourself out there, and you do have to figure out a way that is authentic to you, more importantly, and how you are communicating about the amazing work that you are doing every day, right? Even if you don't feel like it all the time. And so I definitely wanted to plug that as a resource. But this is something I feel incredibly, incredibly passionate about, particularly when I'm talking to leaders in my position, kind of coaching them through some of these things. And I tell them all the time, I don't care if you have to set a monthly reminder for yourself. Like, I would hope that we all kind of get into the business and the practice of doing this intuitively. But if you are somebody that can't do that, or in the very beginning as you're getting used to it, set a timer, like there's nothing wrong with that. And in that reminder for yourself, do a quick assessment. Who have I not seen or heard from in a while? And make it a point to check in with them, right? And ask what they're working on. But more importantly, ask them what they want to be working on. I tell them all the time, your influence is currency. And that is incredibly valuable. And how you wield that actionably, right, is really where like the good stuff happens. So, nominate somebody who you maybe because you did that quick assessment, you feel like might be being overlooked, or you're checking in with them and they're telling you, hey, I'm, really wanting to break into this, or I'm having a hard time, right? Like getting staffed on, this particular matter in the law firm sense. So, nominate that person who you think might need that boost and that help. Challenge assumptions as well is such a big part of it. Often in organizations, things like fit and readiness come up, right, as issues. And so can you, again, use your influence, spend that currency that you've built up over your career to really challenge some of those assumptions and ask questions about why that perception of that person might be, right? Kind of dig into it a little bit. And more importantly, just speak names in rooms of power that you happen to belong to, is sort of, the sort of all-encompassing way that we can all work towards a better outcome and environment for everyone.
Wow, that said beautifully. Like that was so many gems in one, uh, like 1 minute, 2 minutes. I don't even know. I got lost in what you were saying. And it's, like speaking from personal experience, like I'm starting to work on a new project within my business. And I can't even tell you, like, I saw some comments about men and how when women brag, we're looked at negatively. And when men do it, they're like respected. And something that has helped me, and speaking to what you said, was like sharing with the men in my life and the leaders I look up to what my goals are and where I feel stuck, and actually going to them as a resource as well as women, but involving them in that process so that they can brag about you and so that they can speak highly of you,
Yes.
so that they have the information about you and what you do well, to bring that to other people who might not be looking your way, maybe because you're bragging too much about your about yourself. No, I'm kidding. None of us are.
Never.
But I love that. And wow, again, just like Gabby, I think previously was saying, I hope you are taking notes. My next question, for all of you, and we'll start with Angelique on this one, is how do you foster a workplace where people feel comfortable? I kind of hate this language of like to bring them their full selves to work. Maybe we could walk that back and be like, what even is that to start with in this day and age? But so how could we foster a workplace where people feel comfortable while also respecting boundaries and differences? I feel like you are the go-to on this question.
Yeah, I think it's all about the company culture. You have to align what you want out of your people based on those values that you've already established and set in terms of the workplace. One of the things I always find, and my peers shared about the culture fit. That's one thing that has always gotten me. There's not a culture fit; it's a culture add. What added talent? What added balance does this person bring to the organization? And the first thing about having any open workplace is having an open door policy. How do you treat individuals when they have suggestions, recommendations, or just have a concern or issue? Do you frown upon it, or is it like, we'll take it next quarter? Or are you very open and receptive to listening to constructive feedback? Also, do you really again, highlight individuals who are not recognized? You find that I feel like there are sometimes individuals who are voluntold. Here's a project, you're great at it. I want you to do X, Y, and Z project. But there's someone else on the team who has the same type of talents, same credibility, same caliber, who's not actually getting the showcase or getting the shine. So it's up to us as leaders to create a welcoming environment, an open door policy that allows individuals really to bring their whole self. I think for women, we're afraid to do that. I can tell you when I started my career eons ago, it was frowned upon to even say you had children. So I'm glad that, we're getting to a place that is embracing that we have a full life outside of the workplace. So making sure that your workplace is cognizant of people's different challenges that they have, whether it's personal, professional commitments that they have, that you're very receptive, flexible, and agile to adopting a workplace that understands individuals and that we're humanistic and not robotic when we respond to different challenges that our employees are facing. So for me, it's all about being very authentic, humanistic with your workforce, very collaborative. When people feel like they can collaborate, then you have a workforce where people are free to be their own self. When you're not able to do that, you're just a cookie cutter workplace. I'm here, I'm gone. And basically, that's it. So we have to really focus on the value that these individuals are adding to the company, to the culture, and just be in a place where you feel like you really belong.
And that's really the importance, in my opinion, of like ERGs and these like special interest groups, right? It's like these like smaller ways to help people feel like they belong and that they're seen and that they have things in common with their coworkers. Like it could be as simple as being a owner of a dog or any pet, right? And like you can share struggles or look for someone to watch your dog, and I think those like small things really do add up and make people feel just a little bit more like they might belong in an organization. Kim, let's go to you.
I mean, Angelique just hit that one. I don't know how you follow that.
All the sides.
That's all, but that's a good thing, right? I think what I thought for this first was just be human and show up human wherever you are, because that will subtly influence everyone around you to also be human. Right? Like I walked into this chat and I was like, BT dubs, everyone's puking. And there was an instant response in the chat of like, oh yeah, we've been there. We feel that. I showed up at work today with that. I literally have a Slack message right now that says throwing up is not fun, from someone I haven't talked to in forever. Right? I've muted it, but it's still showing up on my screen.
Yeah.
So the more you show up as a human first with like, hey, I'm sick, I got to take off. Like, oh, yeah. I screwed that up. Or I am a very casual cusser, being from Chicago originally. And I do occasionally pepper my speech with exciting words. And just being like, oh, I screwed that up, man. Like owning your failures, owning that you made a mistake so that it's okay for other people to feel like you can, just being a person. And I think a lot of us women especially are taught to not be human in order to not be seen as valuable or have a problem or to be compared against the other men on our team or the few women that we are working with, right? Because there's always the fear that there's only enough space for one. But if you can try to be as human as possible, other people around you will also be more human with you.
Right.
You can't have a community unless you build one, right? The postpartum saying, right? Where's the village, right? You're not going to have a village unless you're someone else's village.
I love that. Wow. You guys, I could listen to this all day, truly. Reham, do you want to answer this question as well?
Yeah, it's funny because the first thing that popped up for me is right along the lines of my co-presenters here, and for me, I think it comes down to vulnerability, right? And so I think with starting with modeling that, which Kim did beautifully at the top of the talk here, and I think I'm thinking in terms of even just like my team, where a few weeks ago I said, hey, I'm actually starting to feel a little of the burnout. So I'm going to take a Friday and a Monday off. And I hope that you all talk to me. Like, when's the last time, what PTO do you have coming up? Because if I'm feeling it, I know you are, right? And so I think just modeling that vulnerability. And it doesn't mean you have to overshare. It just means that showing people it's okay, as they just said, to be human. And more importantly, I think it's also just celebrating differences, right? So it's not, there's the things that we have in common, but also just making space for where we are different. But people, giving people really the option, more importantly, to yes, to be themselves and to show up as their full selves, which I agree. We have to like rework that, I think.
Yeah, working.
Yeah, I would love to rework that. I think we've kind of evolved past that, but yes, doing that, of course. But I think another important thing to keep in mind and to remember as well, is to give them the option as well to not have to disclose or perform their identity, right? And I think that that's so important. And so it's like having this space via the vulnerability, but also respecting those boundaries, right? When folks are just not, wanting to maybe not everybody wants to bring their full selves to work, and that's also okay. We can find other ways to connect. Yeah.
I honestly love that so much. And I feel like my generation, Gen Z has really normalized this whole like disclosing all your mental health problems, right? Like to everyone. And like, personally, I've struggled with like mental health, but like, do I need to talk about it all the time? No. Some people feel like they need to, and that might be their mission, their prerogative. But like, for my sake and like, my business and what I do, like, I don't need to share a lot about it. I could share what's relevant. And I could share that like when I go to conferences the week following, I am curled up in my bed and I don't want to talk to anyone. Right. But you don't have to disclose everything. And I think it's okay, to your point, to say, no, I don't really want to talk about that, and I think that's so important to call out. I also wanted to add something here that like the whole, being vulnerable thing is really hitting me with AI. So like there's like such radical transformation happening right now. And I don't know if you guys feel it, but there's this like huge like wave of like fear and like anxiety in the air. And I personally like, even though I'm a young person, right? I'm supposed to know all the technology. I'm like not on TikTok. So I don't always know the trends going on. And I feel like I'm not on the front line of like building this technology. So I don't know what's coming and blah, 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 blah. I don't have a million hours in my day to like learn AI. So this whole thing of like, there is something that a lot of us across the world, just like when the pandemic happened, a lot of us are going through collectively, and we're like, it will displace a lot of jobs. It will like do X, Y, and Z and make our lives better in a lot of ways. But how can we get together to like, use this moment to like unify us as like a workforce, but also like just as humans. And one of the things that I talk about a lot is like friendtorship, which is this like mutually authentic, beneficial, and vulnerable relationship between two people that's based on the 3 L's. What can I learn? What can I leave? And what can I leverage? And when we talk about like AI and what we want to learn in this new age, and like, what are we vulnerable enough to admit that we don't know? That then opens the door to so much discussion, collaboration, mutual learning. And I think it's like such a beautiful thing that I want to see in more workplaces. So with that being said, I'm going to move us to our second to last question, which I think relates to what I just shared. Can you guys share an example, either personal or from your organization, of a time when inclusive practices made a measurable difference in culture or performance? Reham, can we start with you? Do you have one on the top of your head? Okay, cool.
Yeah, of course. I actually want to bring it back to, you had brought up ERGs, or affinity groups or BRGs or however you you describe it, at all the different places. So my previous firm, one of the things that I championed that I was probably the most proud of was we assigned a board member as a board liaison to each of the affinity groups that we had. And it really was meant to be a two-way street and a two-way learning, more importantly, right? It was, kind of demystifying like what the board of directors does to group members, but it also was, another way for those leaders to have that community in mind as they are in that room and at that table and making decisions that will have an impact, right, on everyone, frankly. And one of the things that, many things came out of that, but it really was a measurable difference in terms of the conversations that happened between those communities and those leaders led to actual, change of policy or, things that we improved on, right? That they had just never even thought of before. And seeing that sort of from above happen over and over again was really impactful and very powerful for a practitioner, right? Just to sort of see this happen, because a lot of our work, you don't see the results maybe ever. It's like a slow moving, right, like progress towards something. And so it was really an impactful and very powerful way that I saw how this all works, and creating, again, that space within the organization. And then, having those inclusive practices to even have that conversation or creating that, that structure for them, really did change, measurably, things that were tangible. So that was a pretty incredible thing to experience.
Beautiful, beautiful share. Thank you so much. And I feel like ERGs are something that many organizations have implemented. And I think it's something that should continue for sure. And I would say the structure of them and how they function could be rethought using use cases like that one, right? Like what has worked, and let's follow that, right? Let's go to Kim next.
Sorry, just heard a small scream, but it stopped, so I panicked a little bit. I was a manager prior to stepping down, and I had a team that was majority men and had never really focused on the parenthood aspect of being male, and instead just like they showed up at work, they did their job. And I wasn't a parent at the time, but one of their kids showed up once and there was like a cluster of embarrassment, a little push to the side. And I was like, no, come on over. And once that started, It became like we can have your children on Zoom calls. And you know what? Your kids are sick. It's not just your wife's responsibility. Chip chop. Like, and do you need to go? We'll cover your tasks, right? And like not like a tacit acknowledgement, but like an overt acknowledgement of if we work together better and we support each other through real life, right? Because kids get sick and life happens. The more that we can build that kind of support structure in our own team, the more productive we are, right? Like tasks weren't going left undone because someone was out for 3 days with their kid. It was being picked up by somebody else. There was more efficiency than in the workload, and then priorities were taken care of. And that parent was going to make up for it, right? They were no longer feeling like they were letting the team down. They knew that they could contribute at a future date. Someone was going to pick it up, and no one felt icky about themselves, right? And I thought I was going to use a different word, but I had to hold it in. The idea that you always feel like you're balancing that dichotomy of am I a parent or am I an employee, and am I doing both really poorly? And the more we made that like super inclusive on that team, the guys were like, actually, hey, I'm gonna actually step out for the afternoon and go to my kid's performance. Get it? Right? Like you should show up for your family, and we can show up for you at work in order to make that happen. That's like a tiny micro example of personal life. But the more like we do those intentional things at smaller instances, the more that spreads. Like a wildfire or a disease, but in a good way, right? Like you want that spread.
Yeah, 100%. And like I was just at the LinkedIn HQ, and you know they're talking about the future of the platform, and like they want the future of LinkedIn to be less professional and more personal, like personal stories in the context of a professional network. But like I've seen so many parenthood type of posts, like very vulnerable ones, like take off on that platform because that's what people are craving. Like people want to understand what happens behind the scenes of your fancy corporate job or you know your crazy life of as an entrepreneur. Like people really want to understand what are the underlying things that you're dealing with because they're dealing with them too. And the more that you can appeal to that, the stronger you know your storytelling is going to get, the more people are going to you know be a part of your community, and also the greater influence you'll have to make that ripple effect like you were talking about. So I love that. Angelique, why don't you bring us home with a nice little story?
Yes, I have so many, but one I truly remember is that one of the organizations that I was a part of, we had an all hands meeting. It was led by all senior leaders, senior management, and it felt like most of our employees were getting left out. So the decision was made right after we had the all hands was to send an actual completed document with all of the highlights, any commentary for all employees to share any input, any suggestions, any recommendations, to get feedback from everybody as a collective versus a small percentage of individuals who were controlling the narrative. And what we gauged from that whole process is that you learned a lot from individuals who were not a part of the process, who had not been a part of different teams or different tasks or different groups and deliverables, but they had the opportunity to contribute and add value in a very meaningful way. And for me, that's an example for every organization to ensure that all employees have an opportunity to collectively share any feedback or any suggestions that they have about how the business is doing, how they can better improve processes, and how they can make their workplace a better workplace.
Yeah, that just hits home for me personally. The reason I started creating content in the first place was because I realized through personal experience that culture matters a lot.
Mhm.
And I was in conversations hosting communities where they were talking about reimagining work, and they were like all over the age of 45, and like there's nothing wrong with that, but like if we're talking about reimagining work, we need to include the younger generation in
Exactly.
the conversation, right? Like it's an opportunity, and it's if we don't do it, like it's a missed opportunity, and those people are just going to opt out. And that's kind of what we've seen with Gen Z, to be honest, a largely opting out, but not entirely. But yeah, I think that speaks directly to like why I do what I do. So
And that's
appreciated
great
that.
too. And we want every, part of each generation. We have every generation represented in the workforce today, yet you only hear for a majority, typically from baby boomers and a percentage from Gen X, but we want every generation to participate in the workplace because you're a part of it. And that's the only way that you can be a great culture is having the voice representative of everyone that's a part of it.
Right. And typically, like, age doesn't really get talked about as much. A friend of mine, Maureen, hosts a podcast called Gets Late Early. It Gets Late Early. And it's all about ageism in the tech industry. And I think, like, we kind of approach this ageism thing from, like, both sides of the equation. It's like, hire more young people. And she's like, hire more older women. And it's like, yeah, because it gets late early. And, like, when you're young, like, no one really respects you unless you go raise $100 million, which is kind of crazy. But that brings us to our final thoughts, and appreciate everyone for all the engagement in the chat. We might have time for one question if I hurry up. So, what aspect of inclusion do you think needs more attention in 2025? You could also touch on, like, where companies are failing and why. Reham, let's start with you.
Yeah. I think in 2025, for me at least, I think we actually need to go back to the basics, believe it or not, with all the innovation and all the things
I
that are
believe
happening.
it.
Yeah. I just think starting with, more importantly, just clearly defining what we mean when we say inclusion. I think over the years, the term has become so broad that it's almost lost its clarity in certain spaces. And I think we just have to re-emphasize, more importantly, that inclusion is for everyone and it's not a zero-sum game, right? And that creating a culture where people feel seen and respected and valued really benefits every employee. And more importantly, for those who it matters to, drives performance and retention and innovation and all of the great things. But we need to be better, I think, at connecting inclusion efforts to business goals and culture outcomes. Like, so much of what we were talking about is how important culture is, but showing it as a value add and not just a moral imperative, right? So I think for me in 2025, the theme is like, let's go back to basics and let's, like, make sure that the foundation is strong.
I love that. And yes, like, definitely we need to go back to basics, I think, with everything.
Yeah.
Let's go to Angelique next.
Yeah, for 2025, I feel like we've regressed some since the pandemic in the workplace. So, my advice for employers, employees, collaborators alike is we've talked about this all day, is to have a very humanistic, people centered organization. You can't do it without the people. If all of your talk, all of your speak, and everything you center around is around numbers, metrics, da 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 da, what have you, it should be centered on the people that are responsible for the work, the people that are responsible for the processes, the people that are they're responsible for your profits. So it's so important for us in 2025 is to go back to what we were focusing on during the pandemic is people. We've somehow lost touch of that, and we need to revert right back to it.
Definitely. 100%. Let's go. Take us home, Kim.
I mean, yeah, there's nothing to say after Reham and Angelique hitting people in the non-moral imperative, and it's just getting work done. So I guess because I can't say anything about that fact, they've already hit every topic. The only thing I can say is if you are working on this yourself, right, you're not at the high level of the company and you can't determine where the company goes in terms of aspects of inclusion. The only thing you can control is you, right? Spend your social capital on others. If there aren't continuing inclusive practices in your workplace, or things are changing due to shifting priorities in the US government, or your company no longer feels that they are going to pressure certain things or enforce certain inclusionary methods, you can, right? Spend your social capital on others. It's not a waste, it's an investment in them, right? And you're showing that you care for all of those people and you can be inclusive there, right? If you have that can't, they hit all the topics, man. They hit it all.
100%
That's where they're
agree.
at.
And you all were so incredible. Please put your links in the chat so people can find you, keep up with you, anything you're working on. And I just want to say thank you so much for joining us. Don't go anywhere. Up next is a session on, it's a live Q&A with expert coaches from Coach Connect. How lucky are you all? We will see you back on the virtual stage soon. Thank you so much. Bye.